you obviously were involved in Robin of Sherwood back in the years, and which was great. You were terrific in that. What started your work with doing sword work? Because you've done a lot of behind the scenes sword work, and you've worked with the great Bob Anderson as well.
I worked with Bob.
Which I'm that is infinitely fascinating to me. So talk a little bit about maybe some getting involved in that and some of the experiences you've had doing that work for various films.
I was very interested in all kinds of weaponry from being a young man, whether it was things that go bang or twang or thump or slice, and I actually made swords in the metal room. I was actually making swords at home and knives and all kinds of stuff. So I was interested in that, and obviously growing up in Yorkshire, I grew up with the tradition of archery. So I'd already done archery, I'd done some horse riding, and when I got to London, I did some fencing at stage school. But I met a guy called Michael J, and I studied with Michael a technique called Iaido, which is a Japanese sword form based on the katana, and it's all kata. So I was practicing that and getting into that. Along came Robin of Sherwood, and there was the chance to put all of that together, and I was very lucky. We had Terry Walsh, who was the stunt coordinator, good sword master, very highly respected stuntman in the UK. We had Gabe Cronley, who was the stunt coordinator on Munich. He was our archery advisor, so I had archery tuition from Gabe Cronley. We had Stevie Dent, who's now one of the top stunt coordinators in the world, was our horse master, so I had horse lessons from him. So I was very lucky. I had Terry Walsh, Gabe Cronley, Stevie Dent, and the likes of stuntmen like Wayne Michaels. And if you saw the beginning of the Bond film GoldenEye, where Pierce Brosnan dives off the edge of that is Wayne Michaels.
Right.
So we were lucky. I learned and was befriended by the stunt guys in the UK because we did most of our own fights. I don't think in Robin of Sherwood I was ever doubled by anybody for anything. Yeah. We literally worked side by side with the stunt guys, and we built up a good relationship with them. That's why to this day I still have a lot of respect for them.
Yeah.
So naturally, after 3 years of doing sword fights and choreographing basically my own sword fights, because Terry would let me just go off and do it. He'd go off with Graham Crowther and go and do a sword fight, two-handed sword fight over there. And we'd work it out, the stunt guys, and we would do our own fights because he couldn't control all of it. He couldn't be everywhere, so he'd let us do it ourselves. Well, then what happens is you kind of get to be known as an actor that is physical and can do that, and then when they want to train somebody else to do it, somebody's going to come along and go, well, he can do that. Why not get the actor that can do it to train the other actor that we're trying to get to do it?
Best of both worlds.
And with Bob, that the true story with that is, and again, I'm one of those people that believes if you're open enough and willing enough to step through the door, opportunities will just come to you. It's just one of those things. So I was actually doing a friend of mine a favour who was in the military, because I'd spent some time in the military, and I was these guys were from the parachute regiment and from the Royal Marines, and they were wanting to be action extras on the first night. So I went down with these guys and one of the companies that was supplying these guys to introduce them to the stunt guys that I knew. So I was doing these guys a favour by just turning up and trying to go, Dinny Powell came over to me and said, what are you doing here? So I said, I'm just with the boys, I'm just helping not to meet everybody, hook everybody up. And he said, I've got somebody you should meet. So I walked over and he went, Bob, he said, this is Mark. He said, this is the boy for you, right? And I went, Bob said, just do this. He handed me a sword. He went, can you do this? Fling, 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 fling. So I went, okay, fling, 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 fling. He went, so you speak the language? I said, yeah. He went, okay, do it back to me. So fling, 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 fling. He said, can you try this? He said, do that move. He said, try and lock the sword in. I've got a blade catcher here. He said, try and lock it in there. So we did the little move, put the sword in, he caught it. He went, okay, hang around. Right? Absolutely true story. So Dinny K comes over and he said, what did Bob Anderson say to you? He said, he wants me to hang around. He said, oh. He said, all right. He said, do you know who Bob is? I said, I've got an idea. He said, well, hang around. So calls over, Bob, we stood around the field. He goes, we're going to Pinewood, get in the car. So we pile in the car, we go to Pinewood. As I'm getting out of the parking lot of Pinewood, Richard Gere's walking across the lot. And Bob said, Richard, meet me in the band room, which is a big rehearsal room. He said, meet me in about 15 minutes in the band room. He said, I want you to work with Mark. Right? So this is now getting weirder. So we go to the band room. Bob shows him the little move to Richard. Richard goes, who's a great swordman, let me tell you. Richard really was good. And we do the little move. Richard does the little move. We go fling, 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 fling. I lay the sword in. He said, Richard, try and fleaver the sword up. And he said, Mark, just flick it up in the air. Which, you know, it's an old trick. You flick it up. It looks like he's done that, but actually I'm propelling the sword up in the air. So we do the little thing. Richard, I think on the second or third attempt, literally went ping, 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 catch, snap, flick, and it went. The sword rotated through the air and landed right in his hand. So Bob went, fine, great. He said, okay, come with me. Richard went off. We walk across Pinewood. He said, so what are you doing for the next few weeks? I went, you know, not a lot really. I'm, you know, waiting for, you know, see what turns up, you know, telly-wise. He said, okay. You walk into Jerry Zucker's office, and he went, Jerry, this is Mark. He's going to be my assistant for the film. And he's going to do the challenge bit, the very beginning with Richard, where he flips the sword up in the air. And he looked at me, and he went, let's say, all right. And I went, okay. So that was it. 9 months, the next 9 months of my life, I was running around the set of First Night. And one of the lessons I was telling the students this afternoon was I had actors coming up to me on the set going, what are you doing? You're like a theatre actor. What are you doing working, doing this? I mean, what are you thinking? You know, it's like, you should be one of the knights or something. And I went, I'm learning more on this side of the camera than I ever would on that side of the camera. And that experience on First Night, absolutely, all of that was applicable to King Arthur.
Yeah.
The setting up and the rehearsals and the putting together of the fight sequences, all of that basically from lessons I learned from Bob Anderson. And one of the best ones, and I'll quote Bob again because he's, you know, one of my heroes obviously, was Stellan Skarsgård came to me very early on, and he said, listen, he said, I'm 52, I chain smoke, and I've never done a fight, let alone a sword fight. How am I going to, give me a clue here, what is this about? And I said, I'm going to quote Bob Anderson. I said, a sword fight is a drama scene where the blades have the dialogue. Right? Think of it as a dialogue scene where you're talking, but it's a conversation in steel.
Wow.
And Stellan went, got it, let's go. So that's my, you know.
And if you don't know Bob Anderson, one of the greatest swordsmen, like trained people in Star Wars,
Absolutely.
James Bond films, he's terrific.
He choreographed Star Wars, Highlander,
Yeah.
The Princess Bride is probably the classic sword fight that everybody remembers that
Yeah.
Bob did. But he worked with everybody from Errol Flynn. One of his first jobs was with Errol Flynn.
Right.
He's one of the few living guys. And he was in the Marines during the Second World War, and he was sunk twice during the Second World War. So he's had a bit of a life, Bob, you know. Very interesting life story.